Good afternoon, Flagstaff. Welcome to the latest installment of the Flagstaff Career Exploration Series. I'm Paul Kolpinski. I am your host for this afternoon and this interview. And today we have with us Daniel Stinski. He is the production manager at Novakinetics, and we're going to be talking with him about aerospace engineering, manufacturing, all of the stuff that they're doing for aviation right here in Flagstaff. So if you didn't think that there were really fantastic careers in here in Flagstaff in really some innovative, creative industries, you're wrong, because we're going to learn a whole lot about that today as we talk with Daniel. Daniel, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So, Daniel, Novakinetics is the name of the company. It's here in Flagstaff, but I can imagine that most people have never heard of Novakinetics. So can you give us a little rundown as to what Novakinetics does?
Yeah, it's so we are an aerospace company here in Flagstaff. We cover a lot of different areas, but our primary focus is composites manufacturing. So our main shop deals with resin and fiberglass. That's the main body of composites. And a lot of this work is done in the fact that it's easier to create lightweight shapes via composites to go on these aircraft than what you might be able to get with traditional machining methods using aluminum or steel and things like that. So our main focus is the fairings and cowlings for aircraft, specifically the Air Tractor brand of aircraft, which is a modern day crop duster. So while we do focus on the basic composites to do fairings and cowlings and things like that, we also do advanced composites of various sorts using prepregs, autoclaves, to make various different creations such as bell mouths and high-end structures for various different aircraft, anything from structural work to non-structural work. We also have an armor side company that creates ballistic armor for aircraft. And then we also have a metal and sewing department which creates and makes seats to go in a lot of these aircraft, anything from air tractors to helicopters, to various other small projects here and there. So it's kind of a, I guess, three-pronged approach: composites, seats, and armor. And that's what we mainly focus on here at Novakinetics.
So we're talking with Daniel Stinski. He's the production manager at Novakinetics here in Flagstaff, and we're going to be taking your questions. We're streaming live on YouTube and Facebook, so go ahead in the comment box, type in your question, and I'll forward it to Daniel so he can answer it for you. So Daniel, you're the production manager at Novakinetics. What are the responsibilities that come with being a production manager in your company?
So being a production manager, to cut it short, is to get what the customer orders to the customer. So what a customer will do is they will send us what's called a PO, or a purchase order, which details what parts that they need created and at what rate they need them created at, so they can meet their own deadlines for their own work. So my job is to take those parts at those rates and combine them with our manpower and schedule that out in such a way that we can meet the deadlines for our customers so they can get the parts and put them on the planes, get them up in the air. That's mainly what I do. There's also a couple other things. I cover some of the basic parts of HR. I do training, and even occasionally when we need it, I'll jump on the line myself and make some of the parts myself. Well, I try and do that more often than I do stay at my computer, but that's the majority of it, is to make sure that we meet the supply demands that our customer is looking for.
So you're actually manufacturing these components right here in Flagstaff. So you have a production facility here in town. You're out northeast on 89, and your job is to see everything from beginning to the end for the customer.
Yes.
How much of your job also is actually managing the line people who are doing the work on the manufacturing line?
Um, Less than it used to be. Now we have several team leaders and under management personnel that I trust to delegate tasks to. So um, if I'm busy working on trying to figure out what the next financial goal to hit or the next production goal to hit, then I can take that down and bring it to my team leaders and say, hey, okay, this is what needs to be done this week. I need you to talk to your guys and make sure that everything's flowing smoothly. Um, every once in a while, I'm down on the floor with them. I'm supervising them to make sure that they can get their jobs done, that they have the tools that they need to do that. And then when I can, like I said, I like to jump on the line myself and help the guys. I like to prove to them that not only can I be in the office and making sure that everything runs smoothly, but that I have the skills to show them how everything needs to be done, and that I can pull my weight too.
So why do you think that's important as a manager to do that?
I think it's important to one it if you expect somebody to make something for you, then you either A, need to be knowledgeable about it, or B, uh, really know how to do it yourself. I mean, I think that that's two slightly different things, but they are really similar. And I like to go out there and if possible, lead from the front. Say, hey, I can do this too. I'm right here with you, and give them the confidence that they need to pull through and get done what they need to do. And then it also helps that I have some of the most experience here on in the shop. So when questions inevitably arise, I can be there, I can help answer them. And I'm not just that guy that's behind the closed door in the office, telling everybody what to do. I'm actually out there pulling the weight with them.
So getting out on the line with your colleagues, with your teammates, is a leadership strategy that you've developed as being the production manager. Where did you learn those skills of leadership?
Um, I'd have to say that a lot of that was done on the job. All of my leaders up until this point have had no issues coming out and saying, hey, let me show you how this is done. You don't have it quite right. Or that you've done a great job, but this is something you could do to make it even better. Everybody from my previous managers, my previous bosses, all the way up to the president of the company, Jim, have always had the idea that if you can come down on the line and you can talk with your personnel from top to bottom and be able to see things with them and help them move and grow even to help them grow more, that you can help move everything forward easier and build that camaraderie throughout the company rather than having set tiers of people telling you what to do.
So what are some of the other positions that are on the production floor or within Novakinetics that someone who's listening, a student maybe in middle school or high school, they might go, ooh, that sounds interesting. I'd like to learn more about that.
So our base position right now is a composite technician, and the composite technician covers a multitude of different things. That's working with the wet resin and the raw fiberglass to put that into shaped molds to create the parts, and then we'll create the raw parts, and then that moves on to more technicians that are over in the trim areas. The trim areas take those raw parts, they trim off the flashing, trim the parts to dimensions described within the customer drawings. And then once that gets done, they get inspected, they move on to finishing, prep, painting, where those technicians, they'll take the parts, they'll sand them, and they'll get them ready for primer paints, which will go onto the parts. They spray those themselves, and then those get shipped off to the customer. That's our base kind of position. There's a lot of different things that can be learned in that. But then, we have an advanced composite technician that will learn how to bond several assemblies together. They'll learn things like pre-preg resin systems, learning how to bake and use autoclaves on different parts. Um, and then we have the different departments as well. There's the armor technicians that will actually go out. They'll make the armor to our drawings. They'll actually laminate all the various pieces, get them finished, finalized, and then painted to go into aircraft. We also have the sewing department with basic sewers, seamstresses. They run the sewing machines. They build or they sew together the seat covers and pads to go on these frames. And then we also have the welders that will weld the frames together. We have the junior welders and the master welders, and they've got various different tasks, but it's mainly putting the frames together and then working on experimental projects. Those are probably, I guess, the base production line positions. And then there's, we have structured R&D to make new parts which customers might require specific characteristics for. We have an engineering department with junior and senior engineers, people coming straight from NAU to get some on-the-job experiences before maybe they move on to a bigger company. And then we also try to get we put together leadership teams. We have working group leaders. So every department within the company and all the sub-departments have a leader that the production employees can look up to give them specific training, to teach them how to do their parts, how to inspect their parts, and what is acceptable from one level to the next. So that's kind of a rough overview of a lot of the production and R&D side of those positions.
So here's a question from Mary who's watching on Facebook. She wants to know what type of education and training is needed just for someone to get their foot in the door at Novakinetics.
Well, not a whole lot. We actually like to take people with little to actually no training in some cases and bring them in and teach them some of these procedures and some of these techniques and skills, because it does one of two things. We teach somebody some valuable skills, some real life work experiences, but we often get people who apply to us that come from various composite backgrounds, various aerospace backgrounds. And while occasionally that does find a niche here, a lot of times what we find is when we bring them into our company, we have to break down a lot of what they've already learned in order to teach them what we do here. So we have people here that are currently in high school learning to do some of these things. They're coming in on their summer vacations to, I guess, be journeyman composite technicians here. And then we have people anywhere up from there to college graduates, engineering degrees, and so on and so forth. We like to provide a lot of the hands-on training here, and we don't necessarily require anybody to have a minimum amount of education or training before they come to us.
Are there some skills, though, that you like to see in someone who you're going to start to train?
It depends, but yeah, anybody with any sort of creative background, art or sculpting, painting, I believe that anybody who comes in with an artistic background kind of has an eye for what we do here, because what we do here is not pushing buttons. It's not just setting a machine to do a job to get something done. It's very hands-on. It's very creative. You have to go in and you have to have an eye for detail when you're putting these together. Now, so somebody with like an artistic background or a creative background is great. We also like people with construction backgrounds. They have an innate understanding on how things need to go together. A lot of them can read blueprints or understand solid instructions. And then of course, for like our painting and body shop, we like people to have, if possible, automotive experience. If one of the guys we hired did all of his own body work on his car, and he turned out to be an amazing person to have on the line for when we were shaping these parts and painting them and getting ready to go on to the next thing. And then he did that as a hobby. He didn't have any professional experience, but just having those skills in creating or construction and things like that, those are useful skills we like to have coming into Novakinetics. Usually as a hobby, but sometimes people come in from other work background experiences that have similar skills that work out very well.
That's a fascinating idea, because you think of aerospace and aviation as being very technical and engineering based. But what you're saying is actually there's an art to what you're doing, and that's almost valued sometimes even more, depending on the work that you're doing, than the mathematical person. But there's probably room for the mathematical person too, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's we have different classes of parts. There's usually well, anywhere between like a class 1 part and class 4 part. Class 4 part is like, a non-structural part, something that, while it needs to be dimensionally correct and trimmed to that, it doesn't need to be engineered in such a way that it's absolutely perfect. These are design pieces to go on aircraft. They help with the flow of the air over the aircraft, so you don't have any hard edges. It's all smooth and whatnot. But then you have the structural side of things, where these things need to either be under load. Sometimes that's structural spars within the aircraft that are made out of carbon fiber, which we'd use like the prepregs and the autoclave for, or in some cases, like recently we put together a Class A radome, which had to have a 90% or more transmissivity through the front of the radome. Now, that is something that really requires a lot of engineering and that mathematical portion to it in order to get that transmissivity to where it needed to be. And so there is definitely room for both. The majority of what we do is on the non-structural side, but we do a fair enough on the amount of things on the structural side that there's room for everybody.
We're talking with Daniel Stinski. He is the production manager for Novakinetics here in Flagstaff, and they design parts and fabricate pieces of the exterior part of aircraft. They do interior upholstery and seat coverings for aircraft, and they also do for, I guess, military grade aircraft, ballistic defense components for those aircraft. And we're taking your questions, so if there's anything you'd like to know about what Daniel's doing or Novakinetics, type it into the comment box and we'll forward it and have Daniel answer your question while we're live on YouTube and Facebook. So Daniel, here's a question for me from this. When you think back to where you were when you were younger, those things that interested you at that time, maybe when you were 10 or 12, or maybe when you were middle school or high school, are there things that you can look back on and connect them to what you're doing today that were maybe influential in your career path?
So it's actually funny that you'd say that, and bringing up some of the younger school bits. I've always been on the creative side of things. I've always liked constructing things and generally being artistic. But one thing that stands out that I thought was really kind of interesting going into the idea of this interview was in high school. I went to Coconino High School here in Flagstaff. And at the time, and for the life of me, I cannot remember the teacher's name, Mr. Horn. Mr. Horn was running the technological application class in high school. And one of the things that we did there was a project called Walk on Water, where we had to create shoes that allowed us to walk on water. And so that was my very first introduction into fiberglass, production management, and learning how to create parts out of foam. Now, this was a multi-year project, so unfortunately I wasn't able to see it from beginning to end, but I got to see a lot of the beginning of it, and I always thought that was a really cool thing. And several years later, I was given the opportunity to work here. I jumped on it, and here I am doing many of the things that I started learning in high school through Mr. Horn's tech class, and actually applying that in a real world situation. So that was something that really kind of, I think, influenced me to start jumping into this direction a little bit in my school years.
So there's obviously a strong component in doing stuff with your hands, right?
Mhm.
That's related. So if someone loves to do something with their hands rather than doing textbook work, there seems to be a theme here that I'm hearing that's a real component, that if you do love to do something with your hands or be creative in that realm, then this type of fabrication work might be a career path for someone who's thinking about that. Would that be accurate?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There is a certain amount of, I guess, textbook portion in the fact that we are an AS 9100 certified company, which means that we have to follow certain rules and regulations to make sure that all of our parts that we create are aircraft grade. But the vast majority of work here is all hands-on. It's learning how to create from nothing with your hands parts that will go on to aircraft that people will fly all over the world with. And so I think that it's a very interesting position in the fact that yeah, there's a lot of creative license here. There's a lot of working with your hands that I think a lot of people don't think they can make a real career out of. And and I think that that's not true. You can find places like this where you can do things, build things, construct things, and that's a huge possibility. And this is just one example of what's out there for that.
We're talking to Daniel Stinski. He's the production manager at Novakinetics here in Flagstaff, and we're taking your questions. And Daniel, David wants to know what type of education is needed to do this type of work.
Well, so for me personally, I went through high school, made it through high school, I started college. At the time, found it wasn't for me. And so I started your basic, oh, I'm out of high school, starting retail job. And from there, I kind of bounced around a bit until I was given the opportunity to work here. So really, a high school education is kind of what's needed in many ways. I mean, they've taught me a tremendous amount of things here, and I've learned a lot. I mean, we have people here that are still in high school. Like I said, they kind of are gaining journeyman experience coming in here and working over their summer breaks. So I don't think, depending on what you want to do, there's not much that needs to be here. Now, granted, every little bit of education is going to help you get through. I mean, if you want to really grasp onto the design and development, having an engineering degree is going to go a long way to get you doing that. But a lot of these guys, they'll design it, they'll develop it, and then they'll come to us to create it. So we're actually the ones getting hands on. We're the ones actually making the parts and getting them through the line after they've created it. So in terms of what's necessary, I wouldn't say a lot. But the more you want to do, the more opportunity there is if you did gain a little bit more.
Well, that feeds into a question that Mary again has. Do people from one department or do people move from one department to another within Novakinetics, or are there kind of lanes that you wind up staying in because of your expertise?
Um, so if anybody stays in a lane due to their expertise, it's an unintended consequence. We don't like to keep anybody in any individual field if they wish to learn more. So we are very much behind the idea of getting people trained, cross-trained in as many different fields as they want. Me, for example, when I was on the production line, I learned everything I absolutely could. So I would be able to do the layup composites. I'd be able to trim. I'd be able to prep, paint, I could do armor, I could do sewing. The only thing I never really got any talent with was welding. So what that did for me is it created sort of my own enrichment bubble, if you will. They were able to put me in any department on any given day, depending on what value they needed to add to that department. And that's what we try and do with all of our employees, if they so wish. If they want to learn more, then we'll give them more to learn, so we can move them from department to department. And we find that that makes for a more enriching experience, because every day is not always the same. One day you could be painting parts, the next day you could be making parts, the day after that you could be running autoclave series with pre-break parts. I mean, if you have the drive to learn the various different things here at Novakinetics, then there's going to be nobody standing in your way from letting you experience all there is to experience here.
So John's watching on YouTube and he has a comment. He says, it really seems that a willingness to learn and to show up, or the other way around, to show up and learn, get you in the door. It seems that that is the basic skill set and a transferable skill set. So the willingness to be adaptable and to learn new opportunities when they're given to him. It seems like that's possible for you, for someone working at Novakinetics then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even the willingness to show up is kind of probably the number one job skill you can have for any job. So if you're willing to show up, then most jobs are willing to keep you. So I think that that's very important. But also the willingness to learn is huge here. We do occasionally have people that come in, we hire them, they seem to do really well, and then they just put blinders on and they keep to their work, and they don't seem to last long. And it's not necessarily due to us saying that they're not working out, but they burn out because they are just doing the same job over and over again. It's, to them, it's a paycheck. To the rest of us, it's an experience. It's got to be fun to come to work.
Yeah, otherwise it's work, right?
Yeah, otherwise it's work.
Right. So here's another question. And this is an interesting one, because, you know, when we think about aviation and all of the things that go in that, that's typically, in my experience, a male-dominated field. So this viewer wants to know, is this an industry that is welcoming to women?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, my number one trainer for, gosh, the better part of 6 years, and to this day, this is 12 years into my career here. To this day, I will go to her and ask her questions if I don't know the answer. But my trainer for the first 6 years has been a wonderful gal named Terry, and she is perhaps one of the most talented people I've ever seen in the composites industry. So I would say yes, absolutely. If you have the want to be here, the will to learn, then yeah. In fact, gosh, I can't remember where it's at, but any of you did a kind of like a interview of jobs around Flagstaff, very similar to this, and they did a kind of like a commercial thing. And one of our really talented gals, Amanda, was the number one absolute favorite choice pick for that. So we made her the shining star of Novakinetics for that commercial, because she was just that good. So absolutely, it's a fully welcoming community here.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. So when you think about those skills and those transferable skills, when you think about your pathway, you described kind of taking a non-traditional route, kind of finding yourself, but was there something along the way that you had to say yes to intentionally in order to set things into motion for you to get where you are today?
Yeah, and it's funny saying this, but the hardest thing I had to say yes to was honestly a promotion. They wanted to promote me into production planning and then up to production management, from team leader at the time. And that was really tough because that was a conscious move into knowing that I was stepping off the line and moving into more administrative role. So that meant learning a lot of new skills, like Excel. Excel was a really tough learning curve for me for somebody who doesn't have a lot of math experience. So it was stepping off the line, being away from that group and not being able to create every day. That was a bit of a challenge, um, but I've grown a lot. I've learned a lot, and now I've set myself up to success in the fact that if I do my job and I do it right, that means I can get back on the line and play around with stuff, get my hands dirty with the guys and gals on the line, and actually create things here and there again. So that was the toughest thing I probably had to say yes to.
And that's a good yes, obviously, because someone else recognized your potential. And it was, would you say that for you, it was a matter of you seeing the same thing in yourself that they saw in you?
I would say, yeah, I think it's really hard for people to look in the mirror and look at that in a positive light, in some cases. And sometimes it takes somebody else to come up to you and say, hey, you're doing a great job. I'd like to see you do more in order to really pull out what potential you have.
So when you think about the people that work for you now and you recognize that potential, right? Going back to the leadership skills that you've developed, um, how do you encourage people to push themselves to step outside of their comfort zone, not to push themselves to work harder or whatever, but just to get to that edge of discomfort so that they can find out what's possible for them?
I think that a lot of that comes down to setting them up to do something praiseworthy, and then also to give them the challenge that they may need. You might see an employee who uh, comes to work every day and is just kind of there. And sometimes it's a matter of finding something and saying, hey, I want you to learn how to do this new part today because this part is really tough. And we only have one or two people who can do it. And we need somebody like you who's willing to step up to the plate and learn how to do something new to do that. And it's amazing when you tell somebody you're giving them something tough, and but then you say, I believe you're the guy to do this. They seem to reach down deep and say, oh, you know what, maybe I am the guy to do that. And then they do it, they see that they do it, and they validated that they are that person at that point.
Yeah, because I think in so many ways we have a culture that it's about not failing. It's about getting it right the first time, even if you don't know the answer, right? Which is ridiculous. How can you be expected to get something right if you've never done it before or you don't know the answer, right? So what I'm hearing you say is that part of it is creating an opportunity for someone to actually make a mistake and to maybe not have a perfect product or first attempt, and giving them that permission to actually learn and push themselves.
Yes, absolutely. That is, in many ways, a lot of people take it hard when they fail, especially here, because they see the men and women next to them doing beautiful composite work. And then, especially on the learning side of things, it could be very detrimental when they fail. They take it very hard on themselves, and a lot of times it's telling them, well, that's okay. That's part of the learning experience. And if you push yourself and you work at it, you'll get there, and you'll see that you can do it. There's I think it's far too easy to punish somebody for failure than it is to give them the praise they need for doing a good job. So I do everything I can to make sure that they get that praise and they get that opportunity to realize that failure is an option because it'll lead you on to something better. It's a building block to help lift you up.
Yeah, and as I've always said, that if you're not making a mistake, then you're not learning. And if you're doing it perfectly every time, then you're not maybe pushing yourself to learn something different or new, right?
I like that. Yeah.
So when you think about a middle school student out there or high school student who's still trying to find what really interests them and what could be a potential education and a career path, what what advice would you have for them?
Don't give up and try everything they can, because sometimes you'll be surprised in life that of what you can find if you don't give up looking for something. And then, you know, you can't really understand what you like unless you've tried everything.
Try and keep
Try,
trying and exploring.
try and try harder.
And that's what this is all about, giving students an opportunity to be exposed to career pathways that they might not have been familiar with. And this is certainly a pathway that I haven't been familiar with. And Novakinetics is certainly a fantastic opportunity to engage in aviation and aeronautics and aerospace industry right here in Flagstaff. And just the fact that there are quality career experiences within our hometown is just wonderful to know. And I'm so grateful to you, Daniel, for sharing some of your experience with us today and with the students in Flagstaff today. And thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. We'll
You
see
guys
you
have a
soon.
good one.
All right. So this is the last of our series for this year, this school year. And we hope you enjoy this. Leave some comments in the comment box with your suggestions about how to improve on this for the future. And we hope you found this valuable, our conversation today with Daniel Stinski. And until then, I hope you have a great summer, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.